Listen, man, let me tell y'all about the prisoner, the plan, and the parole board. I know a lot of y'all out there you have loved ones that's in prison, and I'm making this video just for you. Somebody close to me just got denied parole because he didn't have a plan. And I'm not talking about my co-defendant, Chris. I'm talking about somebody else close to me. One of the things, when you walk into a prison, the main thing a prisoner spends his time doing is proving himself and learning trades and learning himself, because you spend enough time with yourself to be able to learn yourself. When a prisoner goes before the parole board, the first thing the parole board gonna ask the prisoner, what's your plan? Why? Because even the Bible says without a vision, people will perish. If you don't have a plan, then you have no sense of direction for your life. And when you don't have no sense of direction for your life, you can be easily persuaded in any direction. And that's how people get in trouble. That's how people get led down the wrong path, because they don't have a vision before them. When you have a plan, no matter what comes your way, you know what direction you're headed in. And that's why having a plan is so imperative to the parole board, because that determines their decision, whether they're going to give you a second chance or let you stay where you at. So when you go before the parole board and you don't have a plan for your future, that to them breeds failure. So the prisoner needs to have a plan. If that plan is just maybe like my plan was to relocate, find me a job. Once I get a job, take my first paycheck, get me a bicycle to use as my transportation, to go out farther and find another job to make sure that ends are meeting for me and that I'm not in a desperate situation because I'm not making what I need on one job. That was my plan. I came out, I executed that plan, and I stuck to it. Even when it seemed it was hard, when it seemed like I could not stay on course with the plan, I had a plan and I stuck to it. If you make a plan and you stick to it, your success lies within you being faithful and committed to the plan ahead. When you go before the parole board, a prisoner goes before the parole board, and he cannot convince them of the plan, then that to them says that you have not thought about your future. And a lot of people get denied parole simply because they don't know what they're going to do with their future. And if you have not been thinking about your future, then there's no sense or no point in you being released, because how are you going to acclimate to society without a plan for your future? Even people out here that's free, you need a plan for your future. If you just working aimlessly and not toward a goal, that's not good. If you just going through life without a plan, without a goal, that's not good. You have to set in motion today what you want to see manifest in your future. As far as the parole board is concerned, there is no point in the prisoner being released if they have not filled the vacancy of their mind with something positive and productive. Because if your mind still empty, an idle's mind is a devil's workshop. That means that when you get out here, bad influences can fill the vacancy of your mind. So that's why you always want to have a plan in your mind that you can stick to benefit you in your future. If you don't have a plan lined up for your life, even being free out here, you need a plan. You need a plan. Everybody need a plan. Not just the prisoner. Everybody need a plan. God expects for us to have a plan. Without a vision, people perish. You got to write down what you want, what you see in your future. I just started working on the plan I had set for my life. It took me some years to get there, but I'm there now. I'm operating in the plan that I had set for my life 10 years ago, walking out of the prison. So if you have loved ones or anybody in prison that you love and that you care for, or you know anybody that's facing time right now in prison, let them know the key to making parole is having a plan. You have to have a plan. You cannot go through life just cruising without a plan, because you're not going to be released. You're not going to be released. I just visited my co-defendant Chris again. They lifted the restrictions from, because they violated his visitation. They just lifted the restriction, and the warden called me and she was like, hey, we lifted his restriction, but there's a limit to how long he can have a visit. So usually you can go into the visitation, you can get there and start visitation at like 8 or 9 a.m. and stay to like 3 p.m. But they limited his to an hour and 15 minutes. I drove all the way to see him. Now Chris is getting ready for parole. I asked Chris, what's your plan? He joking around, man, I ain't got no plan. I'm going to smoke me a fat one when I get out. I say, man, with that type of attitude, they going to keep you right here, Chris. You say you ready to go home, but you don't have a plan. You're not shifting here. He was like, what you mean I ain't shifting here, man? You know I've been in here all this time. I say, yeah, you been in here all this time not thinking about your future. You got to start thinking about what you want to do when you get out, how you going to move differently when you get out. You got to start trying. You got to start setting your life up to be able to easily acclimate to society out here. We just talking. I'm trying to get some sense into this boy head before he go to parole, because he got parole coming up in a minute. So, I could tell that he still got this little wild hair up his behind, and he's still being a little wild. But, there's nothing too hard for God. But one thing I know about God is that God would not release you to a position or release you to any kind of destination where you don't have the character to remain. God is not going to put you in a place you don't have the character to be kept. God watches over babies and fools. God is not going to release Chris if he going to come out here and act like a fool. Why? Because somebody out here going to take his life. All that wild stuff, all that crazy stuff. And sometimes we wonder why God haven't released a lot of our loved ones or let a lot of our loved ones out of prison, or why they're not making parole. Well, maybe God just watching over them, just dispatching angels to keep them. Because some of them, if they get out here and they still got that same mindset, I'd rather see them in there living than out here being buried. So sometimes we have to think about that God knows what's best. God knows those who ready to be out here and those who's not. So, man, it's just something for y'all to think about. Y'all be blessed now, you hear?